All right, let's try this again because I got cut off with a call, as usual. So we are on, let me get back to my PowerPoint. We made it to the parts, table 18, talking about urine formation. Is that where we left off? All right. Well, we're going to talk about it again. The formation of urine on page 413 in the new book, and it says the overview of urine formation. So I want to go over that figure 18.6 again. I think I already covered it a little bit, but let's go over it again. And when you're looking at figure 18.6, you're going to really see filtration, reabsorption, and secretion. Filtration is notated by green arrows, and you can see at the filtration site, you're actually looking at the glomulus. Remember, we've said it numerous times. The glomulus is the filter, all right? You can see going into the glomulus that you have the arteriole, the afferent arteriole that's bringing blood in, and then you also have that capillary network surrounding the glomulus that comes out of it, wraps around all the tubule, and we call that the peritubular capillaries. And remember, capillaries are very important because they lie next to structures in our body so that we can diffuse waste and good stuff back and forth to wherever it needs to go. So those capillaries lying next to that tubule all the way around helps me to be able to give sodium and water back to my system, or take things from my system, from my blood, and pull it back in to the tubule so that I can eventually excrete it or urinate it out. All right. So looking at the glomulus, you'll see that the green arrow is showing that things that are coming through that afferent arteriole, that one coming to it, are being filtered there at the glomerular site. Of course, around it is your Bowman's capsule, your glomerular capsule. And then as we come around to the proximal convoluted tubule, convoluted just twisted, so proximal means close. As we're coming out of the glomulus and we're going through that proximal convoluted tubule, you'll see that we are actually sending out sodium and water to be reabsorbed in the system. And you can see how it's going out to the capillaries. And that kind of just comes out of the walls of the tubule over the interstitial space and absorbs into those capillary beds, those peritubular capillaries. So we are pushing that out of the tubule, the sodium and the water, to go back to the body to be reabsorbed, to be used again. As we go down, we see the loop of Henle, okay, or the nephron loop, same thing, in the nephron loop, and then we come back up to the distal convoluted tubule, and it just shows you some areas there of ammonia and potassium that are being secreted from our body, from our blood, into the renal tubules so that we can eventually excrete that out during urination. All right, so if we have any questions on that, make sure you get with me. And that pretty much covers everything when it comes to reabsorption. Now, there's certain areas where you reabsorb more things. I'm not really concerned that you know where that happens. I'm more concerned that you know the basics of filtration, reabsorption, and secretion. Okay, let me see up here in filtration if we need anything. All right, it talks about the glomerular capsular membrane. Of course, membrane is something that we can push things out of, and of course, at that point that we can, push things to go back to the system, or we can receive things coming in. Reabsorption. It talks about glucose being reabsorbed, and most of your glucose is reabsorbed. It talks about reabsorption on page 413. It says the movement of substances out of the tubule into the blood capillaries located around the tubules are water, glucose, and other nutrients, as well as sodium and other ions. Some of those things are reabsorbed. Whatever I need, what my body says I need, will be reabsorbed from the renal tubules. It talks about the amount of water that's actually filtered out during the day and reabsorbed. We actually filter out quite a bit of water, more than we'll ever see come out in urine, because we actually reabsorb that in the body. Okay, we lose water in our urine too, but whatever we need will be kept. The majority of the water we're going to reabsorb. Table salt or salt, Na+, that's what your pink area is. A lot of that's going to be reabsorbed, and that depends on a lot of factors that we're going to talk about in a minute. We might need to reabsorb more. Remember that water loves salt. Okay, so if we reabsorb more salt, then the water is going to follow behind it, and that has a lot to do with our blood pressure, which we'll talk about in just a few minutes as well. It talks about the very bottom that the medulla is very hyperosmotic. Hyperosmotic are named because they generally promote osmosis of water into them, as do hypertonic solutions. And we said to remember that the nephron loop, when it goes into the medulla, when it's pushing through there, it's actually got a very high level of sodium in there. And we know that water likes to go where sodium is. And that's what we call it hyperosmotic. So usually in the medulla, you're going to see areas that are very full of salt. I think that's all we need there. It talks on the next page about counter-current mechanisms. And we are on... Now we're still just kind of talking on slide 16. It says together these... Actually, I don't know that we knew that. It just talks about right there that it's keeping that a hyperosmotic condition in the medulla. By maintaining a hyperosmotic medulla, the kidney is able to concentrate urine by reabsorbing more water by osmosis than otherwise possible. So just like what we said before, counter-concurrent mechanisms are just your body working together. It's just right there saying again that because my medulla of my kidney is more hyperosmotic, has more, hyperosmotic means it's going to pull more water in. So it's salty in there, there's more sodium, and that sodium is there to help pull more water in so that we can concentrate the urine. It says the amount of sodium reabsorbed largely depends on the body's intake. In general, the greater amount of sodium intake, the less amount reabsorbed. My body will only reabsorb what it needs. And remember, reabsorb means I'm going to keep it. So if I take in large amounts of salt, obviously my body doesn't need all of that. So I only reabsorb a little bit of it, and the rest of it will come out into the urine. It'll be wasted. And if I take in low amounts, then my body's going to probably reabsorb most of that. Depends on what I need, okay? It says, rather than being actively reabsorbed from renal tubules, our sodium ions and chloride ions passively move into the blood because they carry a negative electrical charge. The positively charged sodium ions that have been reabsorbed and moved into the blood attract the negatively charged chloride ions from the tubule into the peritubular capillaries. Figure 18.7 explains the details of how sodium, chloride, and water are reabsorbed across the tubule wall into the peritubular blood. Take a few minutes to look at it. We've already discussed this, all right? Looking up there at that figure, you're going to see sodium, chloride, and water, and how it's passing across the actual lumen into the wall of the tubule, the renal tubule. And at that part, you can see there's some energy that takes place in a couple of those areas. And we're just going across the interstitial space, being absorbed in the peritubular capillaries. Do you need to know exactly everything that happens there with negative ions? No, you don't. I want you to know the basics of reabsorption, filtration, and secretion. Okay, if it's secreting it, it's coming back from the peritubular capillaries into the tubule. If I am reabsorbing it, it's coming out of the tubules into the capillaries to be used in my body again. Over to the side of that, you talk about transport maximum. That's the largest amount of any substance that can be reabsorbed at one time. Just the definition of that, all you really need to know right now. I can't think of a time that you will ever use that. Oh, well, renal threshold, that's a good one. So renal threshold and talking about people with diabetes is a really good one. So sometimes not all of the glucose in the tubule filtrate is recovered by the blood. So when we said that most of our glucose goes back out to the blood, that's not completely true, all right? And I do want you to remember that because your book says somewhere in here, I think probably, but it is true, that most of the glucose that passes through the tubule gets reabsorbed into the body. We use it for energy, okay? That's just how it goes. But with people with diabetes, sometimes they have a lot of extra glucose in there floating around. Remember, their blood sugar is very high. They have a high level of glucose in their blood. And we can only hold so much, and your kidneys can only hold so much. It can only let so much be reabsorbed. There's only so much my body can handle. So when that happens, I will probably see some spilling of glucose in my urine when I reach that renal threshold. It says, for example, the diabetes mellitus, if blood glucose concentration increases above the renal threshold, the tubular filtrate then contains more glucose than the kidney tubule cells can reabsorb. There are not enough sodium glucose transporters to handle this excess, and guess what I do? Then I pee it out, all right? And I see glycosuria, and that's not a good thing, all right? So getting rid of the glucose and seeing so much being spilled over into my urine leads me to believe that my glucose is way too high in my blood. if I have so much in my blood that it goes through my renal tubules, and so much of it, I can't even hold as much of it. It can't even make it through my tubules because there's so much to be reabsorbed. Okay, remember, it gets reabsorbed back into my system. But if there's so much in there that I can't reabsorb it, my renal tubule can't even handle that much, then it's going to be let loose in the urine, and I will see glycosuria, sugar in my urine, glucose in my urine. Make sure you know the terms on the next slide. Well, where is that at? That's way far down. It skips a couple of things, but a couple of slides down, you're going to see polyuria, and that's excessive urination. All right, that's one sign, one of the cardinal signs of diabetes. But if you're peeing a lot, excessive urination, then you've got polyuria. There's 3 cardinal P's. We call them cardinal signs of diabetes, and that's polyuria, which is peeing too much, polydipsia, which is eating too much, and polydipsia is drinking too much, and then polyphagia is eating too much. Got myself sidetracked there. All right, I want you guys to read the clinical application of the aging kidney, because we're going to cover, that's just something you can read on your own. That's something we're going to cover quite a bit of when we get to med-surg. Diuretic drugs is on 415. A diuretic drug is a drug that's going to cause you to urinate for one reason or another. If I'm holding on to too much fluid in my body because my kidneys are not working well, I've got to get rid of that somehow, and I'm going to take a diuretic drug. All right, we'll cover all those diuretic drugs in pharm. We'll talk more about diuretics in med-surg, but you do need to know what the term diuretic means. All right, diuretic means to give off urine, and sometimes we'll use the word diurese, and diurese means that I'm trying to push a lot of fluid out of you. All right, so you might hear a nurse say she's diuresing well. That means that she's getting rid of a lot of fluid by means of urination. All right, summary of urine formation on 415 is wonderful. Filtration of water and dissolved substances out of the blood into the glomuli. Reabsorption is all the things that need to go back to my blood to be reused, and that's pushing dissolved substances out of the kidney tubules back into the blood. And secretion is taking things from the blood back into the renal tubules so they can go in back, so it can be excreted out as urine. All right, page 416 is control of urinary volume. We're going to talk about a hormone called ADH, which is secreted by your pituitary gland at the base of your brain. ADH is antidiuretic hormone, and this is on slide 17. It tells you there that, of course, where it's secreted from. It's from the posterior pituitary gland, which means it's not a tropic hormone. All right, those come from anterior, I believe. But anyway, ADH is antidiuretic. So if a diuretic makes you pee, then this hormone would do what? It would stop you from peeing. So I need exactly enough. My body is a very fine-tuned mechanism, and my kidneys help me to retain just enough fluid to keep my body going and my blood pressure stable. And I have mechanisms and hormones that come from various places that work with my kidneys to help make this happen. And ADH is one of them, coming from the pituitary. It says if there was no ADH present in the tubules, then if there was no ADH, then the tubules practically would become impermeable to water. So little or no water would be reabsorbed from them. That means I would just pee and pee and pee, and I would not be reabsorbing any water. Okay, that would cause me to dehydrate very fast. The water wouldn't be in my renal tubules long enough to be able to concentrate anything to be reabsorbed. So I would be holding on to a lot of waste in there as well. Okay, and massive amounts of clear urine, because there's so much of it in it and not a lot of waste, more fluid than anything. So I can have a problem with that as well. It says on your slide, decreases the amount of urine by collecting ducts permeable to water. All right, so it says ADH is accurately described as the water retaining hormone. You might also think of it as the urine decreasing hormone. So if my body feels like, you know what, I'm peeing too much, then it's going to send out antidiuretic hormone and my urine will slow down. Okay. Now, if I overproduce antidiuretic hormone, then I won't pee at all. All right. So just take your time and think about that, because I think I may have just said that backwards a minute ago, but I'm not really sure. But antidiuretic hormone, definitely. You have to think of it this way. Antidiuretic means to stop peeing. So if I secrete too much antidiuretic hormone, I don't pee. If I don't secrete enough, then I pee too much. Okay? Too much fluid loss. Aldosterone comes from your adrenal cortex. Your adrenals sit on top of your kidneys. And aldosterone is something you really want to piece together when it comes to sodium. Your book says it is secreted by the adrenal cortex, plays an important part in controlling the kidney tubules' reabsorption of sodium. Primarily, it stimulates the tubules to reabsorb sodium at a faster rate. So if my body produces a lot of aldosterone, then I'm going to retain a lot of sodium. Now, why would I need that? Well, if my blood pressure was low, then aldosterone could be released and I would start retaining more sodium. And what do we know that happens when I retain more sodium? Water stays with it. Water loves sodium. So when I retain more water, then I have a more blood volume, more fluid volume in my body, and my blood pressure goes up. So the release of aldosterone will cause sodium to stay, be reabsorbed in my body. If I don't let go, if I don't release enough aldosterone, then I won't hang on to enough sodium and I won't hang on to enough water. Okay? I know it gets quite confusing. All right. We really want to look at aldosterone when it comes to the figure in 18.9 because this is about how your blood pressure works. All right, it says the kidney itself is responsible for triggering, this is under aldosterone, for triggering aldosterone secretion. In fact, that illustrates the importance of the kidney in regulating overall fluid volume and pressure in the body. When the blood volume and pressure drop below normal, this is sensed by the cells in the juxtaglomerular apparatus, the JG apparatus. The JG cells then release an enzyme called renin, and we know that enzymes always make something happen. They're always a catalyst, a chemical catalyst. All right, and this starts the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. So, what I want you to write down on a piece of paper, when my blood volume and my blood pressure drop, then my kidneys, or the JG apparatus, release renin. Okay, renin again is an enzyme. It's just trying to start a reaction. Okay, and then when renin is produced, then my body starts going through the RAS system, the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. And you're going to see that great little figure on 18.9. And we get into this big time in med-surg. At the top, you can see that I have normal blood pressure, all right, and normal plasma volume, all right. One side just say my blood pressure dropped. The other side just says for some reason, my body fluid, okay, I lose a lot of blood or I lose a lot of fluid for some reason, and my body volume of fluid goes down. Both of those things, for whatever reason, the sum factor, something happens to those normalities, and all of a sudden, bam, my blood pressure drops or my fluid volume drops, all right? When those two things happen, my JG apparatus is signaled, all right, says, oh no, there's a problem on the home front, and it releases that chemical, that enzyme, renin. When renin is released by the kidneys, renin actually converts itself to angiotensin 1 in the plasma to angiotensin 2. All right. This is done by another enzyme called ACE. Okay. Angiotensin converting enzyme. Enzymes are always there to make something happen. Now, does it? Oh, it does talk to ACE right here. Okay. ACE is your next one. Angiotensin 2 actually turns into angiotensin 1 with the help of ACE, angiotensin converting enzyme. And then when that happens, angiotensin 2 promotes vasoconstriction of the arterioles if it's a blood pressure problem, okay? Angiotensin 2's primary reason to be alive, to be in your body, is so your veins can constrict, and that's going to help your blood pressure to go up, all right? We always said if our vessels constrict, then our pressure goes up, and if they dilate, our pressure goes down, okay? Now, on the other side, if I have lost fluid volume for some reason, angiotensin 2 then promotes adrenal gland secretion of aldosterone, all right? Remember, we've lost volume in this side, on the right side. So if I start to hang on to more sodium, guess what else I hang on to more to? Water, because water likes to stay where salt is. And that helps me to restore my body volume, the plasma volume in my blood. And I have more volume in my system for the blood pressure to go up. All right? That can be confusing. Get with me if you need help on that one. All right, and we'll talk a little bit about that today, and we'll review again Monday morning too as well, okay? Atrial natriuretic hormone on the next page, ANP, is another hormone that is released when my body senses there's problems, but this one comes from my heart. It says another hormone, ANH, not ANP, excuse me, secreted from the heart's atrial wall has the opposite effect of aldosterone. Remember, aldosterone helped me to save sodium. ANH is the primary hormone in humans. It stimulates the kidney tubules to secrete more sodium and thus lose more water. Remember, to secrete means that it's going to come out into my urine, okay? To reabsorb means it goes back to my body. Secrete means it's coming out in my urine. So ANH is saying, oh my gosh, this is something that's triggered by my heart. It's in my heart. My heart recognizes that my blood pressure is too high. So ANH is going to tell my tubules to get rid of more sodium. Pee it out, pee it out. And I know that water loves sodium, so water is going to go where sodium goes. In return, my blood pressure will go down. Abnormalities of urine volume. You definitely need to know the terms anuria, which is absence of urine, oliguria, which is a scanty amount, and poly always means more. So lots of urine is polyuria. The ureters. They come from your renal pelvis, and they're just the tube that goes from your kidneys to your bladder. Not much more that you need to know except for renal colic. Anytime that I hear the word colic, it's usually some sort of pain, all right? Sometimes it's air that causes the pain, but in renal colic, it says that this is pain caused by the passage of a kidney stone. They have been described in medical writings since antiquity, so a long, long time ago. Kidney stones can cause quite a bit of pain if they have sharp edges or large enough to distend the walls or cut the lining of the ureters or urethra. So if you're having a kidney stone and you have lots of back pain, that means that they're probably trying to make it down the ureters. And when you start having lower abdominal pain right above your pelvis, then they're probably trying to come out of your urethra. The urinary bladder. Only thing I really want you to know about that, of course, it's the collection reservoir for everything that's coming from the kidneys. It says it lies just behind the pelvis, the pubic symphysis. So, like, right below your belly. So, not in your, people think it's right in your belly, but it's right below. It's elastic, so it is able to expand as it is filled with urine. If not, then it would explode, when we got full of urine. Excuse me. It also talked about rouge. Remember we talked about rouge before? It's like when it bunches up, right? When it's shrunken down, and then as things expand, it expands out like a piece of cloth, because we have rouging on some clothes. It's just it's bunched up, and then it expands. And that just gives it area for it to expand out. It says the ureters on the last paragraph pass through the wall of the bladder. At an angle, the arrangement acts like a valve to prevent the backflow of urine into the ureters. I definitely don't want any backflow back up to the kidneys, because the longer that urine sits anywhere for one amount of time, then it can have a growth of bacteria. So I definitely don't want urine backing up into my kidneys. The urethra. The urethra is the tube that urine leaves the body from the bladder. It's, of course, longer in males because of the penis. It says that opening out into the world from the urethra is called the urinary meatus. And you'll talk more about that meatus, too, when you get to Foley catheters. I want you to know the term cystitis, because that means a bladder infection. Remember, itis means inflammation or infection. Micturition, also a term to know. Micturition or urination or voiding are all the same thing. And it talks about two sphincters. Remember, sphincters are ways for things not to back up, okay? And we have sphincters that can help us control if we go pee or if we don't. It says there's two sphincters, rings of muscle tissue, act as valves that guard the pathway leading from the bladder. The internal urethral sphincter is located at the bladder exit, and the external urethral sphincter circles the urethra just below the neck. When contracted, both sphincters seal off the bladder and allow urine to accumulate without leaking into the exterior. The internal urethral sphincter is involuntary. Remember that one. But the external is voluntary. So, in most people, sometimes we can't hold it. But most of the time, it's voluntary. Abnormalities of urine output. Urinary retention is a condition in which no urine is voided. So, for some reason, I can't get it to come out. That could be a few different reasons. We'll talk about in med-surg, like a neurogenic bladder or something like that. But for some reason, I'm holding urine in my bladder. It won't come out. Urinary suppression. In urinary suppression, the opposite is true. The kidneys do not produce any urine, but the bladder retains the ability to empty itself. Urinary incontinence or enuresis refers to involuntary voiding. We all know what incontinence is. It's when people cannot hold their urine in. There's a few different type of incontinence to look at. Urge incontinence is associated, and you'll need to know these, associated with smooth muscle overactivity in the bladder wall. The term stress incontinence is often used to describe the type of urine loss with laughing, coughing, heavy lifting. A lot of people experience that after they've had children. Overflow incontinence is characterized by intermittent dribbling of urine. It results from urinary retention in an overextended bladder. And reflex incontinence occurs in the absence of any sensory warning or awareness. It just happens. There's neurogenic bladder. Some of these neurogenic bladder is just a bladder that's not working. It doesn't respond to any stimulus. It just kind of does what it wants to do. Don't worry about neurogenic bladder right now because we will talk about that in med-surg. But nocturnal enuresis, of course, is bedwetting at night. You do have table 18 too. I want you to look over normal characteristics of urine. It shows you right there the colors. That's a good idea of what to look at. Dark amber is not a good thing. Amber is not really a good thing. Most people who drink a lot of sodas have dark yellow. Light yellows typically are clear people who drink lots and lots of water or have a problem concentrating their urine. When I'm looking at urine, I want you to look at those abnormal characteristics too. Things that can change color or something like that. Compounds are what I find inside the urine, like ketones, proteins, glucose, crystals, and pigments. I really shouldn't be losing any of those things. Okay? All those things are abnormal. I should only have minerals and waste, such as ammonia and creatinine and urea, in my normal urine. Abnormally, I will see ketones, which is the breaking down of muscles. Glucose, of course, is sugar. I should never see crystals in there. All those things are abnormal. Odor, slightly aromatic, it says, kind of like ammonia, but it shouldn't be strong. It should just barely smell. If it smells bad or foul or strong or sweet, musty, like maple syrup, there's a maple syrup disorder, but those are all not good. The pH should be between 4.6 and 8.0. And specific gravity shows me how much waste is actually coming out in my urine. So you don't have to remember those for this course, but you will for med-surg. But specific gravity is letting me know that if my specific gravity is elevated, then I know that I've got a lot of waste. And if it's below normal, then for some reason I'm not getting rid of waste. And those are all things that I would see on a urinalysis. All right, this would have been a fantastic chapter to do in person. But anyway, that's it.